everyone, and thank you for joining today's Smart Industrials conversation. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues and good friends, so this is going to be a fun conversation. Martin Kastner, who is our leader for all things technology across industrial manufacturing, and Mark Lade, who is our leader for all things finance. And you'll see why in a minute. I hand-selected these two gentlemen for this conversation. Again, thanks for joining us. Martin, Mark, thank you both for making the time.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here.
I want to just start with a really direct question. Why did we bring the two of you? Why are we talking about the two roles, the two clients that you represent? Martin, you with the CIO or Chief Technology Leader. Mark, you representing typically the Chief Financial Officer.
Right.
Why are we talking about these two roles today?
Yeah, I can start. I see a lot of technology projects that we do for the technology side of the house. So the CDO, CIO, Chief Analytics Officer, and they typically are in charge of making sure that the technology runs seamlessly, that everything works, has good response times and all of that. But technology is getting more and more complex. So they need to understand, what is actually valued by the business. So what does the business look for? And then they can make it happen through the technology, through the data. But at the same time, they might not be the ones who are actually controlling the business priorities, their budgets and all of that. So from my perspective, the CIO needs to have a much more of an appreciation of the business and the CFO's agendas and priorities.
Yeah, and from a CFO perspective, I think it's getting an understanding of the art of the possible, right? And to what will help make not just the finance function, but really the corporation as a whole more efficient, more effective. How does that jibe with the overall corporate strategy of which the CFO is a steward of?
So these two roles respectively have big areas of responsibility in our client organizations. But what we're talking about today is kind of the evolution of the relationship between those two individuals, those two positions. And I know the phrase that keeps coming to my mind is, business-led, technology-enabled, which in a way hooks in both of your clients. Can you both speak a little bit about what's the so what of that phrase for the client you serve?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, from a CFO's perspective, I think it comes down to better enabling the operating model or target operating model of finance and potentially even more broadly scoped than that. So when we say business-led, tech-enabled, the business-led element is what is that enabling technology that helps to automate and modernize that operating model?
Yeah, and I think when we do any work in technology, in data, in analytics, and of course AI and AI agents are, a high priority, other buzzwords, but that's what's really going to drive automation and new levels of operating models. Our clients don't put these into production just because they are cool or they're shiny new toys. They need to provide a business value. So how do you know what is actually going to provide business value? And the CIO needs to have a much more of an understanding of what is driving the value, what are the priorities. So I think I almost feel like the CFO and the CIO need to be like yin and yang together.
Right. Well, and I love that kind of visualization. And as we work with clients, you two have collaborated many times on IM client engagements. When you've seen it work well, right? When you've seen that truly kind of collaborative alignment between a CFO and a CIO, talk to us a little about like what good looks like. Yeah. What are some of the key success factors when that's a happy relationship?
That's a great question. So in my view, I think that starts up at the front, having a common vision. So, and when we say common vision, it's alignment on the objectives, the scope, right from the get-go. So there's a tight partnership and common understanding and alignment around that.
Yeah, I think having alignment of the technology and the data strategy with the business needs to be there. And as our industrial manufacturing clients are going to their own transformation and become much more like technology companies. So in the past, they have been very good at creating complex engineered products. And now they're putting much more technology into these products. Now they are have mobile apps. They have features that are more true to a technology company rather than an engineering company. So being able to understand, what is the features, what is required in terms of the investments, and that will then drive the technology strategy as well. Because the technology is moving so fast, and you can always, if you there's no money in the world that you can keep up and always have the greatest and latest technology. So setting the priorities and what is really valued by the business strategy, what do the customers ultimately value is going to be really important.
Yeah, I love unpacking that phrase, right? Business led, technology enabled. It's kind of a mouthful. But at the end of the day, these are two individuals, two teams. And I know we've all worked so many clients together, you representing again finance and all things technology. When that relationship has worked, when you think about clients where that's a healthy relationship, describe that. What are some of the critical success factors behind that healthy relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question. From my perspective, I think that starts from the beginning and having that common vision, specifically more along lines of alignment on objectives and scope right out of the gate. I think that's critical. It's easier said than done, but certainly a giant step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, the industry itself is kind of going through a major transformation. So in the past, industrial manufacturing clients have been very good at producing highly complex engineered products. But now they're putting more and more technology into their product. So this might be mobile apps, this could be signals that go back to provide additional services, to be proactive about it. So I think that creates a more complex landscape where the CIO needs to understand what are the investment priorities, because you can never have the latest and greatest technology for everything. So understanding what the customer's values, what the business values is going to be very important. And then I see that relationship between the CIO and CFO almost like a yin and yang, where they kind of work effectively together.
Yeah, I love that visual, and that's certainly the ideal, but maybe not always, right, the context that we've walked into. Can you both talk a little bit about how we KPMG have helped when maybe that relationship isn't the sunniest from the get-go, and we detect that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is you have to sort of force the issue a little bit. So, getting the two parties in a room, going through and articulating, what exactly is the vision and what are the objectives, what are the scope, how are we going to go about this together? And I think memorializing that in a formal way through a document of some sort. So you can always sort of refer back to that as you're embarking on the implementation itself, and it sort of acts as a self-governance in that respect.
Yeah, like you said, we always think about it as business-led and technology-enabled. And I think that's exactly when we implement new solutions, create new technology for our clients, or drive automation. It's always important to understand what's the business value that we're trying to achieve with this. And very often the business has an expectation of the technology that might not be realistic. They might not have the right technology, the right architecture, or even the right data to drive these values that they're looking for. So their expectations might be, I just spend a little more money and I get it, in a month or something, where IT typically needs to be as part of the conversation and also set the standards. What technology tools do they prefer? Often you have options, and you want to make sure that you adhere to those standards and you are kind of aligning with the corporate technology strategy from that perspective. When we work with the business, what we normally do, we actually ask for IT to be involved and to be part of the conversation, because we might have an understanding of what good looks like with the technology that we would choose, but our clients might have their own preferences, and we are typically flexible in terms of the technology that we can use. So bringing on IT and just bringing them into the conversation, like you mentioned earlier, is one of the key things that we provide.
I love that. So sort of subtly or not so subtly, forcing the collaboration, forcing the discussions to ensure that alignment is there, whether it's around the vision that you talked about or the business priorities connected to that. And, serving as a bit of a therapist maybe along the way. Martin, you hit on this a minute ago. We all live in the world that is industrial manufacturing, right? That can be aerospace and defense, it can be automotive, all of the above. Thinking about this relationship, CIO, CFO, let's talk for a minute about our world of industrial manufacturing. Are there any specific considerations? And again, and you alluded to this with just technological advancement as a whole, but I'd like to unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll start. So, like I mentioned, bringing more technology into the engineered products drives complexity. And one of the key cost drivers in the industry that we see is warranty claims and quality issues. First of all, the products themselves become more complex, which have a more prone to quality issues, and then of course fraud as well potentially. But you also have now technology which they may or may not have the core competency in their own corporation. So how do you bring more technology, machine learning, AI understanding into the mix, and how do you actually serve that up to the organization and to the business?
I mean, I think there's a people element to that as well. I mean, you can have the best tools and technology, but you also have to make sure that your team knows how to use it and leverage it best. So you can't go too fast too soon either. So there's a bit of a balance there, I think, as well. So.
And then we can't get away from this topic. I'm going to actually try and unpack a few things that you've all talked about. But this first one around data and how data is core. Who owns the data? Is it the property of IT? Is it finance data is precious as well? How does that subject of data influence this relationship between the two executives that you both represent?
You want to take that one?
I think that's a pet peeve of mine, because the business always says that's IT and the data is owned by IT. That's actually not true.
Right.
IT definitely owns the infrastructure, the technology, and makes sure everything works properly. IT cannot be in charge of the content, the quality, the completeness, and actually capturing the data correctly, because they wouldn't even know what the right requirements are. So we always say data is a business muscle. So the data needs to own the content, the quality, and all that comes along with that data, because they create the data, they decide what granularity, and then at the end of the day, that's also what drives the ability to make decisions, at the lowest level, and then to roll it up potentially. So that is a very common misperception, and we always try to educate our clients. And that typically comes with a solid data strategy to understand who are your data stewards, who are the data owners, besides the people who decide on technology and architecture only.
Yeah, that's right. The governance therein as well, making sure that the data are always clean, that it's structured well. It's the lifeblood of the decision making.
So if IT doesn't own the data, so just to almost debate Martin here, Mark, for a minute, the role of the CFO and that interplay with IT when it comes to who owns, who governs the organization's data. How do you see that play out for a CFO?
Well, I think Martin's right. I do think it's the business responsibility to ensure the data is structured well, that there's, like you mentioned, a data strategy in place, that that there's a governance structure in place as well. And then also, an eye on what are the questions you're trying to answer. And therefore that kind of leads to, well, what are the data that you need to have that either in-house or even externally?
One of the processes, as I listen to you both, that I think is a huge connection between IT and finance. I think of the term intelligent forecasting, right? Getting better at predicting the future for the business. Mm-hmm. Can you both talk a little bit about the implications and the importance of that process for our clients? And again, what's the so what for your respective client?
Sure. I mean, intelligent forecasting is, just to define it a little further, it's the data you would use in-house, but also potentially external data as well, to have a better view into the future with better forecasting, of course, right? So what does the health of the organization look like? Not as much as historical But obviously, looking into the future, what is that telling us in terms of the decisions we need to make now, even from a prescriptive perspective, into the future? So certainly critical. In fact, it can even be a competitive advantage if used properly.
Yeah, I think that's actually a perfect example. Intelligent forecasting and emphasizes the need why CIO and CFO need to work together. Traditionally, and I'm not, maybe the finance guy, but traditionally the forecasting is done on historical data, and you pull data together, and it takes several weeks, if not months, to do a proper forecasting. With tools today and with technology today, you mentioned external data,
Yeah.
bringing in internal as well as external data. We now have the capabilities to have models run and check the data and look which data points are most predictive. And then also forecasting is not just a forecasting model. There could be dozens of different forecasting models that apply, but we can now run different forecasting models at the same time, have the machine understand which ones are the most predictive, and you get much higher accuracy and a much higher output because of technology and because of data.
Yeah, you can get pretty sophisticated with some. I'm sorry, just making sure you dial in on the cause and effect relationships. More sophisticated progressions, and it just dials you in much better for better decision making.
Well, I think you both took me to the next question. We can't have a conversation with a client without artificial intelligence coming up, right? So how does AI impact core business processes? How does AI impact manufacturing itself? How have you seen that change the conversation? And again, this relationship that we're focusing on in this discussion between finance and IT.
Oh boy,
it's a lot there, right? Well, I think part of it too is it's still evolving as well, right?
Yeah.
As we peel the onion back on it. But certainly, I think from simple task, what you think is normally simple tasks, to a much more complex thing, and it's also the more you are able to automate, that frees up your team to do, again, more value added work, and I think that's a key thing as well, and oftentimes is overlooked. But that's, I think it is still evolving a bit.
Yeah, it is very fast evolving, of course. But besides the industry itself going through its own transformation to become more tech and data enabled, the operations and the employees themselves are going through a massive, not just IM, but in general, going through a massive transformation and leveraging more AI, automation tools, and now we're talking AI agents. It's kind of a buzzword, but it's real. It's becoming very real. And the jobs are going to change significantly for our clients. So in the past, they might be delegating, there might be some automation tools. In the future, we're going to see much more automation and machines first, and then insert the humans, the subject matter experts, only where they're needed. And you will probably have the subject matter experts working with multiple agents and be kind of the orchestrator of these different functionalities. Of course, that's all predicated that you have the data, that you have the infrastructure and technology available.
It's almost like with machine learning and advances in AI, you've got another stakeholder around the table, to consider when we talk about this. Last question, and thank you both so much for the insights here thus far. Let's think about the future, the evolution of these roles, because it seems like a lot of what you both have talked about, as we digest it, their roles and responsibilities of these two positions are evolving. The requirements, what's expected of a great CFO, what's expected of a great CIO is maybe no longer the traditional view. If you look at your crystal ball, what sort of predictions do you have for that role and then the relationship to your colleague here?
And I could start from a CFO perspective. I think the role continues to evolve, continues to get more broadly scoped, right? As opposed to just long ago being accounting and finance oriented only, but again, gets a much more strategic role, gets involved with operations continuously. So I think that role continues to expand. The office of the CFO continues to use better and better tools as they become available. And at the same time, again, balancing that with our organizations, with having the right people involved, of course, is always the common denominator. So I think that the role just continues to expand in scope and more oriented towards the strategy of the company and executing that strategy.
Yeah, I would say CFO, CIO, obviously they need to understand each other's areas like we
Sure.
have discussed. The CFO needs to understand much more what the capabilities of technology are, and the CIO needs to understand much more of what the business value is they're going to drive and what their priorities are. At the same time, they will probably still be distinct roles, but we're starting to see clients where maybe IT rolls up into a common role. Maybe there is a person who leads finance and IT. And it kind of forces that issue a little bit. Is it going to be the CFO or a new role? I'm not 100% sure. But I think clients are starting to see the importance of these convergence and are starting to create positions like that. There might still be a CIO, or it might be a CTO or a CDO. I mean, depending on the business that they're in, but I'm definitely starting to see kind of that convergence at the top level.
And I love in the examples you both describe how KPMG, we're right there with our clients to help them navigate this evolution, right? It's challenging, but it's also, frankly, an exciting career prospect for both of your clients.
Yeah, it's fun.
Can't thank you both enough for this Smart Industrials conversation. Really appreciate the insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.